Hi folks, welcome back to the lab. So I was watching Binging with Babish the other day and he was making a breadcrumb topping and made the point of using panko rather than regular breadcrumbs. And at the time I thought, well, how different can it be? It's just breadcrumbs, right? Which led me down a breadcrumb trail of finding out that it's actually fairly different. One difference is that it's made using crustless bread that's baked electrically. I thought, electric bread? I can get down with that. So it turns out that the original legend is that it was invented by people in World War II cooking bread in their tanks. Now, tank battery, 24 volts DC, right? I've got a bench supply, I can do this. So I knocked myself up some electrodes, threw in some dough, and let it chooch. Now, turns out, DC, not so good. One side brown, that's not caramelised, that's like, the other side green. And believe me, neither side of this tastes good. So I think it's going to turn out that, at least with stainless electrodes, AC is the way to go. So I borrowed the Variac from work. Let's hook it up with some waves and see how we get on. So, in case you're wondering, the bread isn't cooked by some magic thing about it being electric. It's not cooked by the electricity, it's simply using the electrical resistance of the dough as a place to put energy, heat, caused by the current passing through it. So, ain't nothing fancy going on in terms of magical pixies, in case you were wondering. Now, after my failure with DC, I did a bit more reading and found that the sort of optimal temperature profile for cooking this involves ramping the voltage up as you go along. Now, I don't know if I'm going to do that. They did a number of experiments and came up with an ideal cooking profile, but I'm just going to, as a first go, turn it on. I'm going to use my smaller shims. Right. Okay, so we've got a relatively small gap in there. So I'm only going to give it, well, firstly I'm going to let that prove for an hour, because I've just taken that out of the first rise. And then I'm going to give it relatively low volts, because it's such a small distance that way. Probably start it off on 30 volts or something. Okay, so it's proved. I've maybe put a bit too much dough in it. So I'm going to chop that off and then get going. What have we got? That'll do. Go fine, I'm sure. Right, so I'm going to try and aim for, well, maybe no more than 60 watts anyway. Let's see. Sorry about the noise. Okay. So, should you be wishing to try this at home, Variacs are not isolated, don't touch the thing. To be honest, this clamp is a little closer than I like, so I'm just going to wedge something under that. Don't touch it. So we got 40 volts, just under 2 amps. Let's see how we get on. Well, we're 5 minutes in and there's heat coming off this and we've got a visible rise there, so I think we're on the right track. It's sizzling less actually than when I had it on DC. There's more power going on this. When I had it on DC I was running around 30 watts tops really, I think. A bit more going on here. Oh, the current's gone up, that's interesting. In the papers that I read about this, there was a kind of a temperature-based resistance curve, and of course it's probably squashed itself out into the electrodes a bit because of expanding. So we've got 3 amps at 40-ish volts is actually kind of more power than I was expecting, but I'm going to let it roll. You know, I think we're probably on the right track here. If this works at all, you know, if I don't have the weird electrolysis thing going on, having moved to AC, then I'll do some science and measure the, you know, do a bunch of different tests with a different separation, and I'll work out an optimal number of watts per cubic centimetre or something like that. Okay, we're 15 minutes in-ish. There's a bit of heat being developed in there. The current's dropped back. Voltage hasn't changed, by the way. I've not touched the dial. So we're now back down to, you know, right about 2 amps. Sounds about right. And the room smells of bread. It's nice, actually. Yeah, I can believe that was bread. We're just over 20 minutes. The current's dropped right off. It is, you know, it's got some temperature in it. I'm just going to crank the voltage as an attempt to just bring it up to temperature. I've read about this in the thing that some of the research that's done is that they had to crank the voltage at the end to get the temperature high enough to get a proper bake on it. Okay, so we're at sort of 30 minutes. It's basically non-conductive now. It's lost so much moisture, I guess, that it's not conductive. I notched it up to 100 volts just for, yeah, just to see what would happen. But there's no power going into it. So I'm going to decapsulate and see if we got bread. Well, we got something. So, yep, it's definitely been hot. It feels like the space. Obviously, by the way, I should have put less dough in or used my bigger spacers after all. But, hey, we're doing an experiment here. It's got quite big air bubbles in it, which I think is not what you want. But I should probably not let it prove for quite so long. I think I let it prove for more like an hour and a half, so lessons to be learned there. Is it cooked? Don't know. I'm going to let it cool down. It's kind of wet on the surface. I haven't got any of the problems I had when I was cooking on DC with the brownness, and the electrodes look fine. So I'm going to let this cool down and see what it is, I guess. That's still dough there. Obviously, before you can turn it into breadcrumbs, panko, whatever, you've got to let it dry out. So I'll let it cool down, and I'll peel the sides off, and then I'll put it on a rack and let it dry out, and we'll see if we can grind it into panko. Right, it's cooled down enough to have a little taste at least. Let's see if this is bread or not. It's certainly quite dense at the bottom. I suppose that's to be expected, it was all cramped up. Is it bread? Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely bread. It's kind of weird. I mean, it's cooked through, but the texture in the middle is different. I think a deeper mould, whatever you call this, oven. I'm going to, next batch, I'll do the bigger spacers and give it some more room to grow, and hopefully it'll work out a bit better. But I'm going to stick this on a cooling rack. That's stuck on there. Maybe I should have oiled those. Yeah. Yeah, it's bread. It's actually not that bad. Yeah, so I'm going to dry it and then see if I can grind it into crumbs. I think it might be a bit dense, to be honest. It's quite bubbly on the outside, but I think that this is because it's too small a box. While I'm waiting for that other one to dry, I'm going to knock up another one with the bigger spacers, just to see the difference, really. Right, again, I'm going to leave this to prove, probably only for 40 minutes or something this time, and then give it the current. Okay, so we've got 45 minutes of prove on that-ish, so let's give it some volts. Somewhere around 75 volts and a little over an amp, maybe knock that down there till about 60 volts. Obviously the plates are further apart now, so we'll need more voltage, but yeah, approximately same kind of power density. I'll see what happens. Okay, 10-ish minutes in, and much like before, we have a good rise. Current's come up a bit. I mean, obviously it's taken up more area on the electrodes. I think that's probably the point of that, rather than it being more conductive now that it's hot. I don't think it's that much hotter. So yeah, current's up to nearly 2 amps. I've not touched the voltage. It's actually near on 65, 70 according to the dial. And yeah, gentle sizzling, bit of steam. See how we go. Okay, once again, current's dropped right off after whatever it is, half an hour or so. It's pretty hot now. I have run higher wattage per unit watt name on this run, so I think it's probably got a better bake. So I think I'll probably pull it out and see what it looks like. Alright, cooled a bit. I'll open it and let it breathe for a moment. It seems to shrink away from the sides as it gets more cooked. You can see that. Remember to oil these this time. Feels pretty good, this one. It has a kind of sort of wet surface, but it doesn't taste floury, so I think it is cooked. I think it's just the moisture must migrate out to the edges or something. But yeah, still no problem with etching the electrodes or anything like that. So yeah, I'll stick this one on the drying rack with the other one. I'm going to trim off this sort of weird uncooked bit on the top. It's obviously, it sticks out the top of the oven box and doesn't really get any heat in it, so I'll trim that off. But I'm also going to cut it vertically to try and get it to dry faster, and also we can have a bit of a close-up look at the internal texture. So it's got a fairly close texture on the inside. It's a little bit different to the outer layer, but yeah, it's pretty dense. Which, to be honest, reading about what you want out of the crumb, I think this is probably about right. So yeah, I'm just going to let it dry. Now I don't know what the optimal level of dryness is. It probably doesn't want to be, completely free of moisture. Like this is, a piece of bread that I left out for ages. It's just crumbly. I don't think that's quite what you want. I think that'll turn too much into dust. So I'm going to keep trying to sort of grind/grate this at various moisture levels and see when it starts turning into what it should be in terms of particle size and all that. So it seems that a coarse grater is the way to go in terms of getting the nice large crumbs that you want, at least in terms of the tools that I've got available. The real grinders have got some crazy machine with a mesh basket and rotating knives, which I can't really replicate at the moment. But this, as a result, to grate it, this does need to be quite dry. This has been drying out for 3 days now. Outside's completely dry, inside still little bit soft, and it's just about right. You can grate it, and you don't get too many fines. This seems about right to me. But obviously it takes quite a long time to grate. So possibly in another video I'll try and rig up some kind of powered grinder that can do this a bit faster, and hopefully in bigger blocks. So, lessons learned and improvements for the future. Well, an even bigger oven or box would be good. But you can make this in all sorts of sizes. You just got to adjust the voltage. It'd be good to have a timer to increase the voltage at the end, because it does need to go up to. You want the the middle of it to reach 100 degrees to get a proper bake on. It's interesting that because it's resistance heating, it cooks from the inside out, not the outside in, which is why it's crustless. And that's why the outside ends up wet, because the outside's colder. And that means that the moisture from the inside is going to condense at the outside because the outside's colder. So it'd be interesting to see if I can build an oven box with some kind of thermal insulation behind the plates and behind the sides, so that the outside isn't cooled so much by being in contact with the plates. And see if that cooks the outside a bit faster, make it more homogeneous. But it is quite homogeneous, and I reckon that it's because it's more dimensionally stable than other bread as well. I think this would be excellent for a bit of carburization. Make some charcoal bricks by pyrolysing is the fella. I think this would be great because you could make the oven all sorts of crazy shapes. You could make it an L-shaped oven and make bricks with a hollow edge, and do the dough to in shapes to suit. Save you carving the blocks after you pyrolyse them, and I think the structure would be pretty good. Anyway, that's it for this one. Maybe tune in for another of these where I make some kind of madcap grinder. But otherwise, thanks for watching. Feel free to share with your friends, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And I'll see you next time. Bye for now.